Good morning, afternoon, and evening, LinkedIn followers, connections, stalkers, everyone in Seeking Alpha and YouTube. Today I'm going to discuss Polkadot, and I also wrote an article on Seeking Alpha, but it's pretty detailed. Now this is also a deep dive, but it's a video, so it's kind of like spoon-fed. And I'm going to talk quick because I have a lot to say, and there's a lot of slides, something like 38. So what you could do is pause the slides and take a snapshot, screenshot, and then you could read the slides if you want additional detail, because I'm not going to go through every detail because I've got pages and pages of information on Polkadot. So yeah, it's not just about coin charts or stock charts. There's actual fundamental analysis that you can do for a blockchain. So let's get started with Polkadot. So Polkadot, the ticker symbol is DOT, which is kind of appropriate. And like I said, today we're going to talk about a deep dive into Polkadot, meaning we're going to cover all aspects of Polkadot fundamentally, and we're going to touch on sentiment in the market and charts for Bitcoin and Polkadot itself, but it's going to be 99% fundamentals. So before we get started, I want to talk to you about the overall crypto market. I think crypto, and led by Bitcoin no less, is going gaga. I mean, there's a potential bubble in the stock market, included the Magnificent Seven, or what they're calling now the Magnificent Four, because Nvidia's gone up, I don't know, a few 100% in the last year. It's just unbelievable. So it's a risk on period in both stocks, equities, corporate bonds, and all forms of crypto, including meme coins. So I'm being very cautionary. I'm wearing my risk management hat. I'm very bearish on all crypto, including Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin is a hair away, one hair away, again, from hitting an all-time high. It's rapidly approaching its all-time high of 69,000, which it probably met for like a few seconds and then came right down. But it looks like we're going to go towards $70,000. That's a nice round number, but I don't think we're going to get much further than that. And there's lots of reasons why, which I'm going to discuss in another article or video. But basically, the sentiment is too giddy, and everyone's making profit in crypto, which means it's it's at a time where it's a very high probability where that people are going to start selling because so much of the supply is in profit. And that's one example of what's called OCTA, or on-chain technical indicators, or on-chain metrics. And this slide here, you can see that's the percent, or in this case, I think it's number. I'm looking at this in terms of Bitcoin. It's number of Bitcoin that are in profit. And this slide's a little old. Maybe it's a few weeks, 2 weeks old, something like that. But the point is that the supply for Bitcoin that's in profit is at an all-time high. And when that usually happens, it usually precedes selling. So be very careful out there. And you might say, oh, but we had high levels of profit years ago, like back in 2021, and the market still kept going up. But other charts, which I'm not showing you here, are perhaps better at showing that we're at a peak. So just be very careful out there. Do not do your heavy buying at this point in time. This is where you should be doing your selling. Here's a chart of Polkadot. Polkadot chart has not been good, in my opinion. Its Sharpe ratio is not good. Its alpha is not good. Any type of sophisticated risk metric for Polkadot has not been good, and the chart has been sloppy. So basically, when Bitcoin goes up, it hasn't been going up too well, and when Bitcoin goes down, Polkadot gets destroyed. Dot just gets destroyed and it goes down, and doesn't even have a good chart in terms of basing. And what I did here is a sloppy cup and handle. because it's not a good cup and handle. I would have liked to see a broader, flatter cup, and I would have liked to see the handle a little bit lower and more tightness in the chart. So this chart's a little old because Polkadot's trading at $10 per share, or whatever you want, $10 per coin. But my point is that there is a cup and handle, and there's potential for it to go up, but I think it's going up only because other cryptos are going up, not because of the fundamentals. That's going to come later, so just be careful. Do not chase this. I think a good place to buy this is, if, like I said, if crypto and Bitcoin goes down, you want to buy it as it's coming down back into the base, or at least buy into the handle as it comes back into the handle. So the bottom of the handle is about $6 to $7. So let's talk about, like I said briefly, let's talk about Polkadot. I'm not going to explain to you what Polkadot is or its 21-page white paper. You could do that on your own. What I'm doing here is a deep dive on my ratings methodology. So I'm just going to tell you a few pointers. So for the background, like I said, this is a deep dive into my scorecard. Polkadot is a third generation, so it's a newer blockchain, layer 0. So no one talks about layer 0 chains. Most people talk about Dapps, like Helium and Teleport and Uniswap, or they talk about layer 1s like Solana. So this is a layer 0. So there's very few layer 0s that are well known. There's just Polkadot, Avalanche, and Cosmos. Now, the white paper was very technical, and it stressed many things, including its communication that they call XCM messaging. And I like to say that Polkadot is a crypto's version of America Online. Do you remember AOL? It was subscription based. Remember, you got those CDs back in the 90s, and basically you paid a monthly fee. And it was closed. It was a closed chain. Well, not a chain, but it was like a closed version or a private internet. And so it was closed, safe, and easy to use. And that's how I like to think of today's Polkadot. The mainnet went live in 2020. The white paper was written in 2016, but it took years for the mainnet to go live in 2020. So here's what's really important. So forget about what I said just now. What's very important is the strategy. It's a fairly unique strategy. It's the blockchain of blockchains. It's solving that what I call the Tower of Babel, because the blockchains in general do not communicate with each other. And when they do communicate, it's a simple form of communications, like Uniswap, like trade, like remittances, like trading or exchanging coins from one chain to another. But the communication, this is one of the most important parts or aspects you need to know for Polkadot. The communication of Polkadot is at a very holistic high level. It's not just exchanging coins. And Polkadot also wants, like everyone else, is solving the blockchain dilemma. And it's not an Ethereum killer. Many blockchains like Aptos and Sui and say that they're Ethereum killers. So I'm going to go through this quickly. So funding is good. It's very high. It's on chain. Management team is excellent, led by Gavin Wood. Underlying technology is excellent. Scalability is okay, I should say. But going forward, it's going to be excellent. The developers are excellent. It's the second highest in terms of number of developers. And if you include the Canary Test blockchain network called Kusama, it is a strong number 2 in terms of developers, right after Ethereum. User experience is below average to average, so the UX is not that good. Hardware wallet availability is limited. User interfaces could be quite tedious. And use case and ecosystem development has been below average, but recently there's been a lot of upward momentum. So that's why I'm rating it average now. So I boosted the rating from below average to average. And overall, I should have said to you earlier that I rate this chain A, which is equivalent to what I'm rating Solana and Near Protocol. And this is based on my ratings scorecard, which is a numerical scorecard from 1 to 10, but I've translated it into a easier to understand rating. So more spoon feeding here. Thank you. Continuing on with the rating scorecard, it's very decentralized, and they met with the Securities Exchange Commission during 2022, and Solana. Polkadot's their legal team said that the Securities Exchange Commission has said that they're sufficiently decentralized. That means, in my opinion, that Polkadot has a very high probability of having a spot ETF approved, maybe, believe it or not, even higher than Ethereum having a spot ETF. So that's very important. Tokenomics was below average to weak the last few years, but I raised its rating to average because of what's going on. But let me tell you what was weak. There was no max supply, and circulating supply was low. But now the circulating supply has risen to a very high level. One negative is that inflation is high at 10%, and one positive, so I'm going back and forth, negative to positive. One positive is that insiders is somewhat low at 33%, so you don't have that whale risk from the insiders, but you do have some risk from the foundation, which we're going to talk about later. Partnerships, you can read this on your own, is excellent. Roadmap is good, and governance is excellent. So overall, I rated it excellent. So going back to the governance, there was some on-chain governance or movement towards it, but years ago, the governance had what I call the Vatican Council, so that it was controlled and centralized, but no more. Social was excellent, meaning social engagement, number of followers. Let's go quickly here. Early backers. Lots of VCs, we talked about that. 340 million in total funding, over 14 rounds. That's a lot of funding rounds. Early backers, again, lots of venture capitalists and hedge funds own Polkadot. You can see it's number one here. And you can see they also own some other of my favorite chains like Near Protocol and Solana. Funding, now this funding, and remember we've talked about funding before, but that was seed funding. This is what's going on now. Like, what's the Treasury doing now, and how are they getting their funding? As I mentioned earlier, they get funding from fees, things like that. But what I want to talk about here and focus here is that their Treasury is available to anyone, any day and every day. You can go online. I put the Treasury address right here, which is not easy to find. I went to the Block Explorer, and I was typing Treasury, and nothing came up. You have to put these words, modlpy/TRS. And then you get the Treasury, and you can see they have 43.1 million in DOT, which you can follow every day, which is worth a lot of money. As of today, I think we're about, approaching $400 million in terms of its Treasury. So that's rather high. The Treasury is rather high. So what's the ranking? CoinMarketCap. They're ranked 11 if you exclude stablecoins, and number 13 if you include stablecoins. So they're far away from Solana, which is ranked number 4, but they're just below Avalanche, which is ranked number 12. And the market cap as of today is almost about $13 billion. So they've gone up quite a bit. There was low, I believe, as low as something like $4.5 to $5 billion during the crypto bear market. So how does Polkadot work? I'm not going to spend too much time on this. What I'm going to focus is on what's making this chain so well designed and what makes it so decentralized. And so it's similar to Near. It's a modular chain, so it has sharding. It's also similar to other L1s. And the components and roles that I like about it, you can see here in the chart. But if you want to know more, go to the white paper. So you can see here that they've got a bridge, and we talked about, we didn't talk about it yet, Moonbeam, and there's other bridges, and you have collators, and you've got the Parachain. That's where the security is done. I'm sorry, no. The parachains are just another name for blockchains. And there are 50 parachains right now with a limit of 100. But with the Polkadot 2.0, there's going to be many, the potential for many parachains, as many as, I don't know, like 1,000. I mean, remember, parachains are like a blockchain. You don't need that many because each blockchain can have many dApps on it. So just keep that in mind. So even though there's a limit of 100, that was fine. In my view, that's fine. But let's go to why it's so important that we have these other rows and components here. So the components are the relay chain. That's where the security is done, and that's very important. And this is a big factor distinguishing other chains. Every single parachain must be secured, must have its security done by the relay chain. And you don't see this case in Avalanche and maybe even Cosmos. They have subnets, but some of those subnets may only have a few validators, so the security may not be high. That's very important, one of the most important factors of this chain of Polkadot. The other thing that's important is even though Polkadot only has 297 validators, it's designed, you can see on the right side here, to have nominators, has many nominators. I'm not sure how many. I think it's 23,000 nominators. And it has fishermen and collators. And so all these, I'm not going to explain them all to you. You could read them on your own in the white paper. But the role of these nominators and fishermen and collators is that to make sure that the chain is decentralized and it's not taken hostage or taken control by a few validators. That's very important. Like you could see here, I'll read one thing. The fisherman, for example, reports bad behavior. So there's a lot of monitoring, for example, that goes on to make sure that this chain is, in fact, decentralized. Key performance indicators, you can read this on your own. You could see, as I mentioned earlier, that we have lots of nominators, but only 297 validators. So we actually have the same number of validators in Polkadot as we do in Near protocol, but Near is centralized and Polkadot is decentralized because of the great design of Polkadot. And you can see that everything's grown lately. The active addresses, new addresses, everything's grown, is up and to the right. So it's a very good sign. If you want more information on this, you can go to Masari, which has a whole quarterly report on Polkadot. Again, performance indicators or KPI, the only thing I want to focus on in this slide, and I made this myself because I wanted to focus on the moving averages. That's very important. And what I want to focus on, as I mentioned earlier, is messaging. And messaging in Polkadot is called SCM transfers. And you can see, again, it's going up and to the right. And you can see in that green line that I made, this is a year-to-year change in the moving average. You could see that it's up 250%. Beginning in the fourth quarter, it's up, I should say, not 250%, it's up over 250%. At one point, it was up 375%. So you could see the growth recently has been very strong, and this is not a one-day event. This is what I did here is I took a moving average of that growth. Well, I'm sorry, I took the year-to-year growth of that moving average. The blockchain trilemma. So I always like to place where each chain is in terms of Vitalik Buterin's blockchain trilemma. And I think Polkadot, especially 2.0, is going to be rated fairly high in terms of this blockchain trilemma. I think it's going to be rated high for scalability, high for decentralization, and even high for security. So that's why I put Polkadot towards the middle. I put it a little to the right, actually, because they were hacked twice when they started. Their multi-sig wallet was hacked. The Treasury was hacked when they first got started years ago. But otherwise, I rate them fairly high. and this is the team. You can read about this on your own. As you know or should know, Gavin Wood in the middle there was a chief technology officer of Ethereum. So this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's got a great team. These are some of the partnerships. There's many, I mentioned them before in the rating scorecard. There's many more that I listed. So this is like up there in terms of being a very, very good chain in terms of partnership with blue chip companies as well as other chains like Cardano. Charles Hoskinson actually speaks well. He speaks highly of Polkadot, and he's made a partnership with Polkadot. Developers, as I mentioned, Polkadot has a very high rating in terms of the number of developers, and they've come down, and recently Polkadot has laid off about 25 to 30% of their team, but this is typical in terms of where they are in their life cycle. It's also typical of what's going on with blockchains. They've been laying off developers. Some of this is outdated, but the point is that that Polkadot is not the best rated chain out there in terms of speed and finality and block time, but they're average. But where they excel is in their messaging in the blockchain of blockchains. But again, Polkadot 2 is going to solve all these problems. It's going to make them a top tier chain anywhere. So I should say. So regardless of where they're rated here, they're going to be a top chain. And here you can see that they have lots of nominators. And I mentioned already the active validators are low, but it's okay because they have waiting validators that randomly get chosen. This is very important. I mentioned that Polkadot is very decentralized, and for the last quarter, the fourth quarter, their Nakamoto coefficient, if you don't know what that is, that's like a benchmark for measuring, for easily explaining in layman's terms whether or not a chain is decentralized. The higher, the better. So you want it to be at least like 10 or higher. And Polkadot's Nakamoto coefficient was 93 in the fourth quarter, I believe, and has been above 90 for a long time. And you can see it's even higher than Solana's, which is 39, and even higher than Ethereum. So even though Ethereum has many validators, like over 1 million, over I think 1.2 million, and 3,000 block producers validators, you could see that it's still not as decentralized as Polkadot. Ethereum has its own list of problems. It's got lots of popularity now with Eigen, which is doing liquid restaking, and then this pooled staking at Lido Finance. And what happens is that causes centralization issues at various points or areas of Ethereum. I mentioned to you before that I've got some of these comparisons. And here you got Aurora, that's the Near protocol, and they got Moonbeam, that's the EVM chain for Polkadot, which is more expensive and slower. So, like I said, it doesn't rate highly right now, but I think it will with Polkadot 2.0. So you could print this out and look at this on your own. Again, you could print this out and look at this on your own. And you could see that Polkadot's on the right side, and it's very similar to the other chains. It's sharded, for example, like, I don't know why they said Avalanche is not sharded. It is sharded. And you could see it has WebAssembly just like Near. And here they put WASM, that's WebAssembly. So it's similar to Near and Cosmos and Avalanche. And its Finality is a little longer, which I mentioned earlier. Its TPS is good, but slower than other chains. But I mentioned Polkadot 2.0 is going to be increasing its TPS to 1 million. It's EVM compatible. And one other point here, you can see the Nakamoto coefficient for Polkadot was only 16, and now it's 93. So you can see the improvements are going fast. And you can read the rest on your own. So use case, I mentioned most of this already, but I want to focus on one area. So it's a GP chain, general purpose chain. Its focuses on chains with specific requirements, like you see in Europe with data privacy. And there are 50 parachains. And it's focusing on Web 2, transitioning into Web 3. But the most important thing I want to focus on, especially going forward, is chain. It's focused on chain specifics and smaller blockchains. That's the key takeaway I want you to get from the slide. And you can see some of the parachains in the chart here. So the ecosystems, not well known, as I mentioned earlier, not popular. You don't see Lido Finance, for example. You don't see Uniswap. That's my point. It's not well known, but it's going to have a lot of probability for a killer app, a no-name killer app, because they're focusing now on smaller chains. Before they had what was called bonding, where you had to bond hundreds of millions of DOT. For example, Akala and Moonbeam were the first and second bonded chains. They had to raise hundreds of millions of dollars and then bond those DOT on the Polkadot system. That's going to be sunsetted. You do not need to do that anymore. There's going to be a rent model where basically you pay as you go. So that's going to attract lots of small chains that are very innovative, and that's going to increase the probability, again, of a killer app. So I believe, based on what I said earlier, that Polkadot, if I was an alchemist, like that little guy in the middle there, I believe that Polkadot has the key ingredients to have a network effect and get that chain going and get that network effect going. And these three ingredients are, just like in a triangle here, social engagement, developers, and funding. Remember, follow the money, and Polkadot has the money. Roadmap and governance, I said, is excellent. We're moving from Polkadot 1.0, which is complete, to Polkadot 2.0 this year. They put out lots of information, such as the state of Polkadot, and that's available on Messari. There's on-chain governance. There's no longer a Vatican Council that controls their governance. Here's some specifics on Polkadot 2.0. I explained some of them already, so I'm going to go through this quickly. Bonding's going to be sunsetted. There's going to be a pay-as-you-go model, similar to the Snowflake, which is a big company run by Frank Slootman. That's basically a company that does it's a cloud company that uses data lakes, and artificial intelligence is going to be very dependent on that. So this is going to be the same model as Snowflake. What else did I want to say? So it's going to be focused. I didn't mention this to you specific. I mentioned it's going to be specific, smaller parachains, but what the real focus is on going forward is Dapps. What Gavin Wood wants to do is have the whole chain run like one giant system of apps working with each other. So it's a pretty interesting thing. I didn't see this anywhere with other chains. It's going to be super fast. I mentioned focusing on faster WASM smart contract development, just like Near Protocol. I mentioned there's going to be several bridges, but what's very important, which I did not mention, is some of these bridges are going to be for L2 chains, like Optimism and Arbitron and Polygon. And as I mentioned, it's going to be broader messaging. It's not going to be simple messaging. It's going to be very advanced messaging. So tokenomics, I mentioned some of this, so I'll talk about it quickly. We got a very high circulating supply, which is good. Inflation rate is at 10%, but it could change dramatically depending about how much is staked. And that's what this chart here. This is showing you how much is staked and what the inflation rate is based on that staking mechanism. And I mentioned we have about 50% staked, but the inflation rate is high. You could see all the way on the right side that Polkadot has a high inflation rate compared to other layer 1s and layer 0s. I mentioned this before. The insiders are 33%, and you could say I put a square around that, around the insiders, foundations, and the community. ESG, environmental social governance, according to CC data, Polkadot is one of the highest rated of all chains. That's pretty impressive. Valuation, this is a little outdated, but still the same. I did this myself. I took about 31 chains. I took their market cap and their developers from Electric Capital, and I downloaded it into Excel, and then I tried to figure out which were the most cheaply valued of all chains in terms of market cap divided by their developers. So I divided by full-time developers and total developers. And it turned out that Polkadot is one of the most cheapest. It is the cheapest, one of the, I'd say in the top 10% in terms of being one of the cheapest chains compared to other layer 1s, layer 2s, and layer 0s. And you could see that I highlighted in black, I shaded the ones in black of the other layer 0 competitors, Cosmos and Avalanche. So this is a good thing. And remember, I didn't tell you this earlier, but you cannot value Polkadot based on other metrics like revenues and fees, because Polkadot has very low fees and it's still in its early stage. So the revenues are very small. They're like something like $700,000 on an annualized basis. So that's lower than a managing partner at a DC law firm. You're talking about a very small amount. Think about that, less than $1 million. External ratings are very high. Whether it's Token Inside or Blockonomy, it's rated very high. Social engagement is very high, and this chart here is from TwitterScore. TwitterScore.io, they rate Polkadot very high for social engagement. And you could look at other things like Telegram, CoinMarketCap, even the number of followers on Seeking Alpha. And I provided them to you in this slide. So what are the risks? There's systemic risk and idiosyncratic risk. That could be venture capital exposure, business risk, meaning a lot of competition, execution risk. Remember, I told you that Polkadot is a very complicated and technical chain, and it's going to be upgrading to Polkadot 2.0. So there's a lot of execution risk, hacking risk, technology risk. Like I mentioned, it's a complicated chain. And there's also market risk. So you say, how could there be market risk? Because Polkadot has all of their money. I think that's a mistake. But they have all of their treasury in their own native coin. So what I would have liked them to do is divvy them up and put maybe 30% into fiat currency, even dollars or Swiss franc. Maybe put some into Bitcoin, but they're not doing that. So that causes market risk and what I call what George Soros called reflexivity risk, meaning when the coin goes down in price, they have less money to spend. And when you have less money to spend on developers, that's bad for the chain, and the coin may go down in price. So it causes a vicious circle. So you have to watch out for that. Well, that's everything, everyone. So I hope you liked this presentation. I hope I didn't speak too fast. So I think I've connected the dots in Polkadot. And I like this chain, even though it's failed to generate hype. I like it because it's got the 3 ingredients that may cause it to pump during this bull cycle. Well, thank you all for listening, and don't forget to smash that like button. Bye-bye.